All right, guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. This is a place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. It's been a while since we had a conversation. So I'm sort of excited to be having this conversation today. And the topic is what's most responsible for racial performance gaps. Uh, I was supposed to have a stream yesterday, but it didn't come through. It's going to be tomorrow. I'll be talking with a Jewish lady on the rise on anti-Semitic attacks in the US. What's responsible for it, and just trying to understand what anti-Semitism is. But today's topic is actually is a fallout from a conversation that started out on Twitter from a poll by Wilfred Riley. He posted. I know he likes posting some polls, and he posted a poll a few days ago, and it resulted in an interesting conversation that I had with some people on Twitter. So I'm going to read the poll and then just see how we can get a reaction from the comments that came in from that poll. And I will open up the stream. Then we'll just talk for not so long because it's not going to be a very long stream, and then we would end the conversation. So this poll, Wilfred Riley asked this question. He said, "What do you feel is most responsible for current racial group gaps in performance? For example, the post 1960s surge and growing racial gap in fatherlessness and crime rates." So he gave options. There were four options. He said systems. He said systems, and he qualified it mass welfare. Then he said culture. That's the second option. And he said the hood culture. Then the third option, he said genes slash genetics. And the fourth option, he said past plus present racism. Now, when I saw this poll, I was like, well, I don't think it's as simple as saying one thing is mostly responsible for whatever racial gaps you find, right? I think that it's a combination of things, a combination of factors. So I did not pick any of those options. Instead, I dropped a comment, I left my comment, and I said, I would say a combination of system, culture, and past racism. Yep. So that past racism part that I put there seemed to tick off a lot of people, and it just generated some sort of responses, which I wasn't really surprised to be seeing those responses, right? So, someone, uh, his name is Chris 087 said, so he said the system racially discriminated in favor of you for longer than millennials have been alive. So I'm thinking he means affirmative action, right? Uh, I think that's what he means, right? But affirmative action is not necessarily is it necessarily does it necessarily apply only to black people, right? Is that what affirmative action is? And is that enough to say that the system has discriminated in favor of African Americans for that long? So them not performing as good just shows that something is wrong with them. So I responded and said, that was a dumb take. African Americans have been systemically discriminated against for far longer than they have been free in America. America is 246 years old. Technically, African Americans have had equality for at most 60 years. So thinking that 60 years is enough time to do on the effects of 186 years of oppression is dumb. So that was my response to him, right? And he did not like that, right? So but this is a weird game. This is a weird thing that both the left and the right does. I think both of them think they are doing something different, but they're doing exactly the same thing, right? So the left would say that the reason why African Americans are where they are today is because of racism, mostly present racism, right? The right will say no, it's not because of racism, it's because they're dumb. That's what they'll basically say. And then I say, do you really think, in response to either of both positions, right? Even if racism is equal today, even if the conditions are equal for African Americans today, there was no discrimination, there was no racism. Do you really think that, given the history, that 60 years is enough time to actually bridge that gap, right? So to right people claiming that, well, you've been free for that long, you've been technically free for 60 years. Do you really think that 60 years is enough to bridge that gap? I mean, a lot can happen in 60 years, and I don't think African Americans are doing that badly. They can certainly improve on certain things, but do you really think 60 years is enough? Well, I think give it time, right? Then to the left, I would say you keep saying it's racism, it's racism, right? But even if everything was perfect, do you also really think that 60 years is enough to actually achieve the sort of racial parity that you're looking for? I would still say no. So I would say give it time. So this is something that both agree on, but they don't, they are just approaching it from a different angle. They're basically saying the same things, and I disagree with them, right? I disagree with them very vehemently. So he commented, he said, just another 120 years and you guys will catch up. And I said, yes. So I said, bro, you had 1,000 years a head start and didn't have written language. So he was talking about Africans, that Africans, okay, so Stanley said the system discriminates against poor people as a baseline, then it becomes more complicated from that baseline. Yes. Also, also understanding that America is a capitalist country, right? You know, people who have money would generally do better, right? And people who don't have money or who don't have as much wealth would typically not do as good. Now, I'm not saying it's an excuse, but I'm saying it's an explanation, right? I don't think that any black person today should have an excuse as to why they are not succeeding. I think there are enough opportunities for them to succeed today. But if you're someone looking in from the outside, you also have to be charitable and understand that some of these challenges are, they are real, right? And you cannot just expect that the past has no effect whatsoever on the present. It does to an extent. So my position is it is not an excuse, but it sort of is an explanation, right? So let me continue the conversation I had with this guy. So he said, you guys had 1,000 year head start and didn't have written language. So he was talking about Africans. So I told him that he should educate himself. Africa had written languages, and I listed some in CBD used in southeastern Nigeria, dating back to at least 2000 BC. Adinkra used by the Akan, Lusona used by and developed in Angola, Luo script developed in Kenya, Eghab script in Cameroon, even the Egyptian hieroglyphics, the Meroitic system in Kush, Tifina used by the Berbers, Gerg script used in the Horn of Africa from about the 8th to 9th century in Ethiopia. So I asked him, so how many European cultures developed writing systems if the Romans had not brought the Latin script? And then he responded, he said the Meroitic script was stolen from the Egyptians, which were in sub Saharan. So I'd say they were Arabs, but Cleopatra was Greek, and King Tut was apparently more European than black. Berbers weren't black. Ge'ez was stolen from the Egyptians and Arabs, but okay, why can't sub Saharan Africans write? And I just laughed. And I laughed and said, really? The history of sub Saharan Africa, of which Sudan is a part of it, cannot be removed or cannot be extricated from the history of Egypt. In fact, the history of Africa itself, right? It's a continent. It's just like, oh, let's go to Europe and start making divisions, right? No, it's a continent. Sudan literally translates as, from Arabic to land of the blacks. And there are even some historians that will tell you that the earliest pharaohs of Egypt were actually Sudanese pharaohs. That's people from Sudan, right? Sudan is in Northeast Africa, which is a part of Sub-Saharan Africa, right? And they have this very close ethnic and cultural relationship or relations with Egypt, right? So he mentioned that Cleopatra was, he would say that the Egyptians were Arabs, but then the Egyptians were, Cleopatra was Greek and King Tut was mostly European. And this is because he doesn't understand history, he doesn't even understand geography, right? I would say he doesn't understand history in the sense that Egypt is not a place that has retained its ethnic composition right from the outset up until now. Egypt is a place that has been invaded by numerous people, from the Hyksos to the Hittites to, people from Mesopotamia to the Romans to the Greeks, to the Arabs. So there is definitely going to be a shift in the ethnic demographics of the people of Egypt. It's going to shift over time. It's not going to remain the way it was. If I were to make a bet, I would say that the Egyptians were most likely a Sudanese people. The original Egyptians were most likely closely related to the Sudanese people. That's what I would say, right? And because of conquests, because of invasion by other people, slowly and surely, the genetic composition, the racial composition, or whatever you want to call it, is going to change. It's not going to be the same thing, right? It's going to change over time. And the fact that some Egyptian pharaohs were of another ethnic extraction, for example, Cleopatra was mostly Greek, which is true, doesn't mean that Egyptians were Greek. It is very, very possible for the ruling class to be ethnically distinct from the people that they are ruling. I mean, look at most of Europe, right? The Russian Tsars were mostly of German origin. Even the current rulers, the current king of the current ruling house of Britain, they are mostly of German stock, right? So it is possible that the people of a place, they are ethnically distinct or different from the rulers, because guess what? Other people come, they conquer, they take over the government, and they put themselves in power. But it doesn't mean they totally replace the population. So that's why he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand that. And also, so I went ahead and he said that the Meroitic script was stolen from Egypt. And then I asked him, where was the Roman script actually gotten from? Where was the Latin script gotten from? If you trace the history of the Latin script, it still traces right down back to the Egyptian hieroglyphics. So, for example, the Latin script evolved from the Etruscan alphabet, which evolved from the Cumaean Greek version of the Greek alphabet, which itself descended from the Phoenician alphabet, which in turn derived from Egyptian hieroglyphics. So I've got to ask. So you're saying Africans do not have a written language? I have proven to you that Africans have written languages. And I'm even telling you that most of the written language you have in Europe finds itself derives from Africa itself, derives from Egyptian hieroglyphics. So your your point is baseless. For you to say Africans do not have a language, a written language, and your written language somehow originated from Africa. What point are you trying to make? And then he said, stolen from white pharaohs, oh my, oh my. Then he posted an article which says that up to 70% of British men and half of all Western European men are related to the Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun. So I just laughed and I was like, oh, the whitewashing of history. Why stop at 70%? I mean, 1 million percent of white men are related to pharaohs. So that's just it's such a brain dead take. So apparently the Egyptians and the British people, they are exactly the same thing, because 70% of British men are related to what? To an Egyptian pharaoh, which is how how did he even come about that? How did he come about that? I'll get to that point later. He said, why aren't there any pyramids south of the Sahara? Well, ignorantly, he did not know that there are pyramids in Sudan. In fact, there are more pyramids in Sudan than there are pyramids in Egypt. That's a fact. And aside that, there are even some claims that possibly the pyramids in Sudan are older than the pyramids of Egypt. So he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just mouthing off. He's just saying things out of his ass, right? So I asked him, I said, so if 70% of British men are descended from pharaohs, where are the pyramids of Britain? I mean, the ones built by the descendants of Pharaoh in Europe, where are where are those where are those pyramids? He wasn't able to say anything, right? I kept calling him Jon Snow. He knows nothing. He knows absolutely nothing. So he then posted a picture of a sandals, as in a footwear showing black people in the footwear, and then um, he said something about the. He said, is that why the pharaohs were walking on you? So I looked at it and I said, oh well. So he was basically showing this artifact to show that the pharaohs were white people, right? And then I asked him, so this sandals is depicting black people. This sandals from Egypt is depicting black people. How do a people make an art for themselves, for their culture, but somehow magically depict another race of people entirely in it? I mean, they somehow magically were depicting black people. White Egyptians were making these sandals for themselves, and they somehow were depicting black people because they wanted to put black people on the sandals and step on them. It literally did not make any sense to me. So I kept calling him, fake son of Pharaoh. Where are the British pyramids? He could not tell me where the British pyramids are. He could not tell me where the British pyramids are. He, even after he claimed that 70% of British men were related to, pharaohs. This is the kind of stuff you get on Twitter. But back to the point of the tweet, the initial tweet, right? What's mostly responsible for African American outcomes today? Is it the system, mass welfare? Is it culture, the hood, or is it genes and genetics? Right. There was another guy that made a comment too. Let me see if I can find him. It was even much worse. He took it to the racial angle, and he said, basically, let me just paraphrase what he was saying. He was saying that the fact that I put past racism there and did not put genes/genetics just showed how biased I am. That black people are never ready to take responsibility for their actions. And I'm like, dude, I put culture there. What does that tell you? It shows that yes, there is some responsibility that black people owe to whatever conditions they find themselves today. So you totally skip the part where I said welfare, you skip the part where I said culture, and you went to the part where I said past racism, and then you were bitching about the fact that I didn't put genes/genetics, right? Because somehow in his mind, the reason why black people are where they are today is because they're simply just dumb. They're simply not good enough. They don't know anything. That's what's in his mind. So we had the back and forth and back and forth, and he told me that the only reason why he was not calling me the N word is because Twitter is going to lock out his account. And I just laughed. I mean, I was like, do you really think that the N word is going to trigger me? Right? Do you Not in 1,000 lifetimes is anything like the N word going to trigger me. So if you want to be a racist pig and and call me the N word, well, good and fine, go ahead. It's not going to make me react. It's not going to. It's not going to make me react negatively, right?
Can you hear me? I'm afraid said the Egyptians got him. Well, the Egyptians did not get me. Still here. Please, we can hear me. Let me know. So I told him that there is literally no way that the N word is going to trigger me. And then he put up a gif of a dancing monkey. I was like, okay, so is this going to make me? I'm not a monkey, so it's not going to offend me, right? I'm not whatever you think your words you're going to use is going to trigger me for. It's not. Oh, loud and distorted. Oops, 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 oops. Is it better? Oh, sound is butchered. Let me see. So let me keep trying.
Is it better now? Fred, Templar, let me know if it's better. I think it's better, right? So, so that's the kind of stupidity that I get to deal with on Twitter every day, right? Just some right-wing nuts. I don't know what the hell they're saying, and they just come with very wild theories. Because somehow they want to paint black people as inferior. They want to paint black people as violent. You see this a lot with the what you call the violence porn that's been spread off on Twitter, right? You just see them posting videos of black people being violent, and then they will tell you, notice the pattern, notice the pattern. And it's something I really detest, because it's just pushing a narrative that is false, right? It is pushing a narrative that is false, because you can look at any negative metrics and you will find a disparity between different quote unquote racial groups. For example, if you want to look at things like trans issues, you want to look at things like gender dysphoria, right? You're probably going to find more of those things in with the white community or with the white race, right? But I noticed that those things are never framed as a white problem. They are framed as an American problem. They are framed as a society problem. They are never framed as a white problem. But when it comes to crime, when it comes to violence, you keep hearing 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the crimes. And then you ask yourself, really? Is that true? Is that true? 13% of the population is not responsible for the crime. A tiny minority of that 13% is responsible for the crime. So how about you hold actual criminals responsible for their actions? How about you hold people isn't personal responsibility a right-wing thing, a conservative thing, right? Isn't people judging people not as groups but taking them as individuals? So I noticed that when it comes to crime, when it comes to black people, they can be taken as a group, and black people are violent. But if there's any negative metric that you can apply to white people, take for example mass shootings. White people are disproportionately represented as mass shooters, right? But you never hear it being framed as a white problem. You never hear the white community, the statement that the white community needs to deal with the problem of mass shooting. It is taken as an American problem, which is rightly should be taken as an American problem. So in the area of crime, it is an American, it's a crime problem, it's a people problem, it's not a black problem. Right? So what would satisfy these people? Would it be okay if African Americans commit exactly 13% of the crimes? Would that be okay? Like, oh, because they are 13%, they are committing 50% of the crimes. That's bad. We need equity. They have to commit at most 13%. This is the representation that we want. But that's all bollocks, because even if African Americans are committing less crime than other groups, it still be a problem to me, right? Percentage wise, crime is crime. You don't have it doesn't have to be a problem now, because with respect to their percentage in the population, they are committing more crime. So you've got to drill down and say who are the people committing this crime. You've got to hold the criminals responsible for their actions, and not just say, oh, black people are criminals. So back to the tweet, right? I said the things responsible for whatever racial gaps you're seeing. I said, the system, and this is something that conservatives have said. This is not just me saying it. I mean, I had a conversation with Professor Robert Sherry, and I'm soon going to be talking with him again, where he talked about the impact of welfare on the black communities, right? This is actually a conservative talking point, right? So why did they take issues with the fact that I mentioned that, the system welfare is a contributing factor to whatever, racial gaps you're having.
That's their point. Why did he take issue with that? And then I mentioned culture as well. Yeah, so I think that there's a lot to be done about the approach, African American approach to certain things. And I can't say that for everyone, but mostly I can say yeah. So the cultural part is part of it. And then I don't think that genetically speaking, I don't think there's anything wrong with African Americans. I don't think there's anything wrong with Black people. So I think the option of genes/genetics is out of it in the first place, because different people have different, different people have different stages in their development at any particular time. If you go back 2,000 years ago, the whole of Europe were not developed at the same, they were not at the same rate, they were not at the same stages of development. And if you go farther back enough, the earliest civilizations were in Africa, right? So where was Germany, where was Britain when Egypt was like the greatest civilization? They were probably in some backwater, they were not probably, they were in some backwater parts of Europe, right? Even the Romans, when they came to Britain, they described them as barbarians, right? As people who are civilized. But with time, these people become, they become civilized. So looking at the state of a people today and saying that, oh, these people are inferior because of how they are today is wrong, historically speaking. Because the Romans could have looked at the Germanic tribes as at that time and say, oh, well, these people are perpetually genetically inferior. See how they're living, right? So I think that's wrong. So that was the point I was trying to pass across to that guy. And then I said, yes, of course, past racism. So there were two options. There were two things together, past plus present racism. So I didn't put the present racism. I said past racism because, in my opinion, I think that present racism, even if it's still there, would not, have a measurable impact in the lives of, in terms of outcomes and all that. Some people might debate it, but that's my opinion, right? So, let me just put this link. If anyone wants to talk, Stanley wants to call in, Templar wants to call in, you can call in, Fred wants to call in, you can call in and let's chat. So basically, this is what I deal with. This is what I deal with on Twitter every day. It's since Musk took over, it's become a right wing. It's just a cesspool of right wing nuts over there, right? I mean, just look at the sort of reaction that they had to Bud Light, the sort of reaction that they had to Bud Light featuring Dylan Mulvaney, right? And the right will go about and say, oh, cancel culture that they're doing, right? They are engaged in cancel culture. They might tame it as, go woke, go broke, but it's exactly the same thing. There's no difference. If you want to ruin an organization because there's an ideological difference between yourself and that organization, how is it any different from wanting to ruining an individual because there's an ideological difference between you and that individual, right? So a lot of them went out to buy Bud Light and they were making videos, shooting Bud Light counts, and I'm like, you guys are actually giving them free publicity, because when all this blows over, they are going to be better known, right? So if any company wants to get famous on Twitter, just do something to piss off conservatives. They'll be your biggest marketers. They're going to make videos of your product. Yeah, they'll be crapping on your product, all right, but it's usually said that no publicity is bad publicity, right? So you can take the heat for a while, and then later on, it might turn into sales for you. So the link is in the chat. Okay, if you want to call in, Stanley, if you want to call in, let's just talk for a while on this topic that we have here today. What do you think from the poll that Wilfred Riley asked, "What do you think is most responsible, right, for racial performance gap?" He gave options. He said the system. He said culture. He said genes. He said past and present racism. I've given my thoughts, and I think it's a combination of things, a combination of factors that cannot just be boiled down or drilled down to any one thing. Like so many things in life, many things are usually nuanced, right? All right, Stanley is in the building. Hey, Stanley, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Yep,
Well, I have a question.
yep.
Excuse me. Um, Twitter. I didn't realize you were on Twitter that much.
I've been, I think I've been spending more of my time on my social media time on Twitter than in any other place. So it's a madhouse over there.
Well, I've actually never gotten on it, and seems like I shouldn't be.
Probably you shouldn't. I think, I don't think it's, it's not a healthy platform. It might be for some people, but there's this thing about it. It just brings out the worst in people. Yeah, it does bring out the worst in me too, right? Because the characters are short, and you want to get your points across. You have to be snippy. You have to almost have biting sarcasm, and at times fruitful conversations. Everyone is just trying to own the other person. So
Wow, sounds like a bunch of me's.
yeah, accurate. Yeah.
So I don't know. The point you bring up about education and these sorts of gaps. I think they're good ones, but I'm not absolutely sure that I guess what I want to say is, America, at least in 2023, doesn't really value education. And for all the, if we're going to measure worth or, where you are in a meritocracy, white people aren't the top.
Mm.
Well, I mean, Asians do way better. And, on things like the SAT. So who are white people to talk about dumb people? They're second best. Now I'm being provocative, but according to their numbers, they're not at the top of the proverbial pyramid.
No, but they're not at the bottom end either.
Well, give it time.
So give it
They're
time.
they're not heading up. I'll put it that way.
That's so let me be like the white guy on Twitter that was countering me. So
You
I
mean
said give it time.
pretend smart?
Yeah. So I told him I said give it time, right? And he said that what time are we looking at here? Are we looking at another 120 years before African Americans will catch up? So if I were to put that question to you, how much time when you say give it time?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I think it depends on how you measure it. And this is going to sound like a race pride thing. We survived, at least in the United States and elsewhere for that matter. It might be a more Pan-African point. We survived pretty bad conditions. That we're here is pretty much a testament to being smart.
So is survival the essence of the human condition, right? Is just surviving enough?
Well, not just surviving, but thriving. You could argue that, even in the worst of conditions, 400 years of, in just in the US, 400 years of you know, this sort of history, um, I think it's better than surviving. I think we're still here.
So Jews have had it shittier for longer, right?
You know what? Um, they're smarter. You know, and if you want to do well, no, I mean, I'm being a little facetious, but they have survived way more than African slavery. The Inquisitions, um, I wouldn't do that kind of oppression Olympics.
Hmm.
We're
So
we're
you
still we're silver medalists.
that's interesting. That's interesting. So what do you think, right? Because it seems like in especially in educational performance metrics, it just seemed like an intractable problem, right? What do you think can be done, right? I mean, not want to frame it as what do you think Black people can do, right? Or what do you think Black people should do? Because I still think it boils down to individual families and, the actions that are taken at the individual level, that will show up in a community-wide, better performance. Well, is there anything that can, if you have a certain percentage of African Americans having an IQ of less than 80. You have the abysmal test scores that you see. What's going on there? First, let me ask you, what do you think is going on there in the first place before you tell me what you think can be done?
That's like a 5 hour conversation.
Well,
Um,
I have 30
I
minutes.
think I think if you're I think if well, I guess I'm in a sarcastic mood. I'm like, well, maybe black people aren't taking it seriously, and maybe there's a reason. Um, you know, 240 years of superiority, and Asians do better.
So,
Maybe maybe it shouldn't have been taken that seriously. And I'm thinking, I thought of Elon Musk, and a lot of people will say, well, it's obvious that building SpaceX and buying Twitter and all this stuff is obviously, Elon Musk is at the top of the pyramid of IQ. And I think of all the people, over the course of 500 years who were Europeans. Um, Even if you want to take out things like, you know, um, indigenous, abuse and slavery and all this stuff, how many white people died or were abused to produce an Elon Musk?
mm,
To get an Elon Musk, how many hundreds of thousands of white people had to die or were subservient or oh no, I just old black men get rather philosophical, but I'm like, white people think that they have it good. I'm not so sure that they're that smart.
but doesn't the evidence bear it out, right? Most of the
Which,
developed
but
parts
it
of the world
depends
are
which evidence. Test
most of the
scores?
most of the developed parts of the world are people of northern European, European extraction. So doesn't that
Yeah,
bear
but
it out that
think about it. India and China, according to some people, will eclipse.
Hmm.
Like in the next, what, 50 years? So, I guess that argument will be, well, white people helped them to eclipse white people.
That could be that could be an argument that someone can,
Well, you know what?
make a case for.
If you wanna use that argument, then I would frame it as white people helped their their uh, their their colonies get ahead of white people. And Anand brings this up a lot. England, where is England? Um, they're you know a proud country, but where are they on this on the totem pole?
Okay, so my question isn't so much about whites going down. My question is about blacks not going up. So we
Well,
can play the game of
do we
whites going
really
down.
want to go up that way?
When you say that way, what way are you looking at? Right? What way do you think I'm talking about? That's what's in that way that's bad that you think we should not take?
Well, I'm assuming you mean things like on standardized tests, we need to be competitive. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be, but I'm also saying, like Martin Luther King, are we, um, you know, getting into a burning house?
So comparatively speaking, do you think that if we took that route, that would be worse off than we currently are?
I don't think we'd be worse off. I think that do Black Americans want to be like white Americans?
They, so if they don't want to be like that, then why are the people like the Kennedys taken seriously? I mean, Kennedy's goal
Well,
is essentially to bridge that gap, right? So to make that parity, and if this is what it takes to get to that point, then what is wrong with African
well,
Americans taking that
that
route?
that's an interesting point. Um, I'm not so sure that Kendi's taken seriously in the Black community.
Well, he is.
Really? I
Yep.
think he's more seriously taken in kind of like the Robin DiAngelo crowd.
Yeah, the Robin DiAngelo crowd and the Kennedy
But
crowd.
Robin DiAngelo, that crowd isn't black. I mean, to a certain extent, I have never seen Ibram Kendi talk in a black church. I don't think he's really that well known. And I'm not being facetious. I don't know that he's any well known in the proverbial hood than Glenn Lowry is.
So, how would you judge his message? How would you judge the reception of his message to African Americans?
I think he's right on a lot of things, but I've said this before, he's a little bit hyperbolic.
He is. I think he
He,
believes.
I mean,
I think he
not
believes
uh,
what he says. I don't think he thinks he's being hyperbolic.
well, he doesn't think so, but it's not for him to think so. It's the readers of his books.
Hmm.
And I don't think he's entirely wrong. I'm not as dismissive of him like a Glenn Lowry or anyone like that.
Hmm.
There are parts of it that he gets right. He just goes too far. I mean, I think that race is a lot less of a problem, obviously, than it was 100 years ago. And it was always more complicated,
Hmm.
in the first place. But I don't know that black people take Kendi anymore. I, I why do you think black people in America take Kendi seriously? It's the first time I've thought about it. I don't think they take him that seriously.
Do you think they don't take him that seriously because they don't know about him, or they don't take his message that seriously, even though they know about it?
I really don't know. You know, I would say that there are really no leaders in the black community, on a Martin Luther King scale to begin with.
Mhm.
So, that, and, I don't, I just don't, I don't know, but I don't think you'll never convince someone, I don't know, in the hood that, you know, um, when's the last time Kendi's been in the hood? Now that's kind of a weird way of putting it, but I think he speaks more to white audiences, and the honoraria and all that stuff. He's not going to make any money, hanging out, you know, in the hood.
Well, maybe because they
So,
already agree with him, so there's no point in patronizing his message if they already agree with him. Right.
well, I don't know that his message resonates any more than a Glenn Lowry or a McWhorter or any of those guys. You
Now,
know,
this
to a certain extent, none of these guys are like normal people. They don't cook their own dinner. They're not picking their kids up from school.
mm. So you're saying their experience is divorced from the majority of the black experience in America. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that both groups are at the top of their game. They're making a lot of money. Um, I don't see Kendi as resonant in the black community.
Mm. So there's something that's always
However,
struck.
that's not. I'm just saying. Let me put it to you this way: telling America that white people are racists isn't a new message in the black community. I think to a certain extent, his audience is just like Glenn Lowry's. Glenn Lowry basically says white people aren't racist, and the other side is Kendi telling white people they are racist. In the black community, and I mean collectively, I don't mean, individually, but this isn't news to the American black community. I think we've known for, you know, quite some time that things aren't quite right. And, it's nice to hear a Kendi, say that there are problems, but I think we've known this for a while. And honestly, I think Kendi's audience really is, to use an anon term, white and woke. Um, it's not a bad thing to tell, young white Americans that, hey, your past is tainted. It's not all, you know, greatness, but I also think that to a certain extent, it's falling on deaf ears.
Mm. So I, what would you think is responsible for? Because I think I get a sense that there is a difference. There's a difference in the way sort of black people in maybe in red states perceive race relations versus those in like blue states, right? So
No,
like black
I
people
wouldn't
from
say that.
Texas would be more, they'd be more, racism, nah, doesn't not that much of a big deal compared to say maybe black people in California. Do you think that's a correct
No,
framing?
I wouldn't say that. Remember that Pew Research poll that I kept harping on, where I was surprised that black people in the US who lean right or are more likely to vote Republican, they think America's a racist country. I can resend you that poll, and it kind of surprised me because I thought, you know, black conservatives would tend to be more like a Glenn Lowry,
Mm.
and it's not racism is a relic of the past, and yeah, it flares up every now and again. Even black Republicans will acknowledge in a poll that, you know, racism is a problem. The question comes in, and whether it's the kind of problem that's, that you should obsess about, or is it the type of problem that's going to hold you back? I agree that it's not going to hold you back, or most of the time, etc. But that doesn't mean it can't be a problem. And so anyway, I'm going beyond the scope of your question, but no, I think black people in red states and black people in blue states, not a major difference if you ask them. Does is it, if you ask a person in say Oklahoma, especially in Tulsa, you know, is racism a problem in the United States? You're more likely to get a yes answer. And Oklahoma's a red state.
That's interesting. That's
Oh well, I
fascinating.
mean, um, yeah, it the
So, so,
Ralph
so,
Yarl,
mm,
I forget which city it was in. I think red states are just as racist as blue states,
mm.
or not
So,
as. It depends on how big a problem you think it is, but um, um, like I said, even black people who lean right
mm,
and are more likely to vote Republican will never say racism isn't a problem.
mm.
Now,
So,
is it a major problem? It's not the biggest problem, in
mm.
America,
So
but that doesn't mean it's not a problem either.
there's a part of the question that I really need you to answer, right? Which is what is you almost gave me the sense that it's not why should black people want to be like white people, right? But I don't think it's a question of wanting to be like white people for you to have improved the test scores, right? For you to have higher IQs, for you to have a stronger family structure. Because there's something I noticed on Twitter, right? Almost all the conservative white women that I get to interact with on Twitter, if you ever check their profile, something is very, very consistent there. You would find them, they will list this wife, mother, something else. Wife, mother, something else, right? It
Really?
seemed, yeah, yeah. It
Not
seemed
just mother?
not just mother, wife, mother, wife,
Well, what
mother.
does that tell you? Why is white such an important,
I
prefix
didn't
to
say
mother?
white, I said wife, wife, mother.
Okay. I thought you said white. My bad.
No, no. So I'm talking about white women. So, but in their profile, they always most likely going to indicate they're a wife and they're a mother before they're something else. So it just seemed to, and and to me, I think black people should. I don't know, but maybe speaking from an African context, right? Family is important to those black people, those of us in Africa, and I think if I'm drawing that extrapolation, I think it should even be more important for black people in America than white people. But it just seemed as if there's a flip, right? So most of the black accounts that even the conservative black women that I see on Twitter that I follow, they are still most likely going to be single mothers. Even when they are rallying against single motherhood, right? They're still likely going to be single
So,
mothers.
so
So
what's your
what's
question?
so my question is, why is that so? Why is the family ties what does it seem stronger in the white communities than in black communities?
I don't think it is.
Mm. but I just used a group. I follow mostly conservative people on Twitter, right? Mostly
Yeah, but
conservative accounts.
let
And
me
I
ask you a
noticed I
question though.
noticed that the white conservative women, right, usually have wife, mother in their profiles. But the
And are
black
they
conservative women
succeeding?
most
Are
likely,
are are these white women who identify as wife and mother raising good kids?
that's not my question. That's a
Well,
secondary
no,
part of the
I
question.
don't think it goes back to my point about why do black people have to be like white people?
Having an intact family is not having to be like white people. It's a
I'm
desirable thing. It's a
saying,
desirable
I'm
human thing.
saying, but Charles, I'm saying these white wives and mothers don't have intact families.
Okay,
If
so
they do,
mhm,
what are the results of those intact families? It sounds good in their Twitter profile, but the results aren't obvious.
what are the results that aren't obvious?
School shootings in America
That's
that
that.
is
No, no,
electing
no,
Donald Trump, et
no,
cetera, et
no,
cetera.
no. So
No,
the
seriously.
school should
No,
see
no, no, no,
the
no.
school.
You have to think
No.
about what you're asking and think about my answer. These people are identifying as wives and mothers, but what is the product that is being produced by these wives and mothers?
The school shootings, just like the violence in black communities, are perpetrated by a small minority of people. You can't use that as a representation of
Okay, well,
white
then
people or
let's
black people.
look at the larger picture. What are we producing? What are the white wives and mothers? Are they producing excellence?
Okay, so I
They're
think
not
that's
producing
a
Asian kids who are doing better than the white kids.
that's a that's a I would put it that's a secondary problem, right? Let's look at the primary. Let's
Well,
look at the
no, I
primary
don't think
problem.
it's a problem. My answer to your question is I don't know that white wives and mothers are putting out a product that black wives and mothers want to emulate.
Okay, they don't have to emulate anything, right? I think having an intact family is a human thing, is a desirable human thing. It doesn't have to be black people wanting to imitate white people. It should be self-evident, right? Because
Okay, what
if
exactly should be self evident?
it should be self-evident that having an intact family, having the father, mother, and children in the house is much better than
Okay,
the
let's
mother
stop
and the
there.
child.
Let's concentrate on intact families.
Mm.
What are intact families producing in America? Excellence?
Okay, so if you had a choice, if you had to pick, right? Which do you think would be ideal? A family that has the father, the mother, and the children, right? Or a family that has just the mother and the child, or just the father and the child.
Well, let me add another caveat to that. An intact family that's rich would be the ideal.
So,
Below
so if
that,
there's no,
well, hold
if
on, let
there's
me finish.
okay,
Below that, it doesn't matter.
so if there is no wealth, then you might as well not just
Yes,
even bother with an intact family.
yes.
Nah, I think that compounds the problem, right? I think wealth is one aspect of the problem. Having an intact family is another aspect of the problem. So if you're,
You know
taking
what?
away.
Which part do you want to tackle first? A single rich mother, I'm sorry, a single rich white mother is
Mm.
probably more likely to do better than a poor intact white family.
So is a single black mother going to do a single wealthy black mother still going to do better than an intact poor a black family?
Yes.
Where's the evidence for that?
Where's the evidence against?
I see. SKC, welcome to the conversation.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me on, Charles, and hello, Stanley. Um,
Hey,
I agree with you, Charles, 100%. Um, Even if you want to look at it from the lens of just economics, we know that in America, the one of the largest, I would say, factors when it comes to wealth is real estate and home ownership, and the majority of home owners in America are married couples.
okay, and your point would be what? That rich people do better than poor people?
Know that married people do better in society in general.
Okay, I'll even give you that because it's probably true. And what has that produced in 2023?
Stable society.
America in 2023 is a stable society.
Well, I'm just looking at the
Well, no,
question.
no,
It
no, no.
says,
Please, let's explore this. America in 2023 is a stable society.
okay, before we go into the weeds,
Well, let's concentrate again on this point. Point me to the stability.
okay, all of the places that people are fleeing uh, to get to places that are away from crime and all sorts of other dysfunction. Those places will be representative of more stable societies, and in a lot of those
Okay,
places,
you've lost me.
you're dealing
Where are
with
they
people
fleeing
who
to? And well, actually, Anon, I wish he were here because he's telling me that people in India that immigrate to the United States and a lot of immigrants to the United States make their money and go back home. So I don't have the
what does
stats
that
on
have to
that, but
what does that have to do with
I think
America?
you're on shaky ground here because
What what does that have to do with
America,
America?
just because people want to come to America doesn't mean America is stable.
You're the one that brought in the idea of people
And
coming to
I'm the one
America with it.
challenging your point. America, do you think America is stable? And
You
people
didn't
wanting to come to America doesn't mean America is stable.
you didn't let me complete my point. My complaint was going with the title of the show, which was a question. It's an inquiry which states what's most responsible for performance gaps, and I was leading into the thought that not having a low rate of marriage, and also the subcultural trends that go along with having a low marital group is probably the most responsible factor for the racial performance
Can
gaps.
I answer? You're wrong. It sounds good.
All right. So one place that people talk about when they talk about performance gaps is in education, and also in rate of pay and so forth. When you do not have intact family units, it's more difficult to build children that would be productive and have a background of education, and then also use that education to go into various forms of basically productive society. It hinders their growth. A lot of those children, instead of being more educated or being productive citizens, they tend to lash out, get involved in criminality or other social dysfunctions. And when you look at other groups throughout the United States, they have higher rates of marriages, and they have higher
So,
rates of success in education performance, and also wealth performance.
so Would you agree that white people are second best in all those categories?
I don't care about whether white people are
Of
any
course
of
you
this.
don't. You mentioned groups. Let's talk about groups.
Okay, all of those other groups have higher percentages of marriage.
Coincidence.
All right. So Oge is in the building. Okay, let's hear your thoughts.
Hi, Charles. Hi, Stanley, and
Hey,
SKT. Yeah. Um, yeah. I just thought of first and foremost, I'll just start by um, saying the, I guess the number one thing, Charles, on Twitter is you. I mean, not like the number one thing. The number one thing that I do on Twitter is I'm normally very mindful of who I speak with because for me there are a lot of nameless, faceless people on Twitter who have what I would say social challenging ideas, and they kind of like to get those they kind of like to get those ideas out in the most anonymous manner. And yeah, I would just say normally I once I see that someone it gives a somewhat controversial response, right? And that person is faceless. I just try my best to just end the conversation there because they are for me not necessarily worth engaging, right? Because there's no point engaging with a nameless, faceless person, right? The second thing I kind of wanted to point at is I don't know. I kind of found the question to be a bit odd or problematic, right? Like when you pose a question, what is the most responsible? No, I mean not you, but the initial author, right? And you pose a question, what's the most responsible for? Was that how he posed the question, Charles? Charles?
Yeah, you said
Yeah. How was the initial question posed?
what is the most
Hello, Charles. Can anyone hear me or hear Charles?
yeah, I can hear you.
So you're the Charles.
Just just the person you want to talk the most to.
Well, I do, Stanley. But I mean,
did you get my question?
yeah, no.
Did you
So,
No,
get
so
you
the
broke up.
you broke up, yeah.
oh. So he said, what do you think is most responsible for the racial performance gap, especially the post 1960s racial performance gap? And then he gave those options.
So, you see, once again, there. I think sometimes they are. I don't want to call it like leading questions or problematic questions, especially when
Wow.
yeah, when you know that they they are. It's just not one singular thing. It could be multiple things responsible for the kind of disparity that's been witnessed. And it's also, I kind of feel like sometimes you also have to at least be mindful of like the social like the social context or framework in which that question's being asked, because what just ends up happening is that you end up opening Pandora's box, and especially in a medium where people have very crazy ideas, right? It's easy for someone who may not be operating in good faith, but then again, even the question or the conversation of good faith sometimes is is kind of mute. But Charles, I guess you understand where I'm going with this, because you just you make
Yep.
people who have certain ideas, you kind of give them the room to, you know, to explore, or to bring those ideas forward, which, I don't know, could be a good thing in terms of fine. It's, you kind of want to have those ideas out there, and like, but then again, it's like, well, you're not really achieving a lot, because you recognize that, one, this is a highly complex, nuanced
Yes.
situation, right?
Bravo. If single mother homes were actually the way to solve this riddle, I think we'd have solved it by now.
Yeah.
It would either be by shotgun marriage, like you will marry this person, or we figure out how to compensate for it. Obviously, the homiletics aren't working, because the homiletics have been around. Well, marriage, as a solution, has been around forever.
Yeah.
So the better question is, we know what the problem is, supposedly.
Mhm.
Why aren't we fixing it? And
Yeah.
why is it taking so long?
Yeah. Or we kind of understand or know some of the factors contributing to the problems. You know what I mean? And then it would, so because rather than, yeah, like rather than, just kind of go ahead based on what is known or what is factual to work towards solving it, just kind of putting it out there in terms of like a questionnaire. Because then again, you're kind of like, you're talking about one group here, right? Like one demographic. And
But
so
see,
yeah, it just,
that's the problem. Concentrating on one demographic, this single mother problem affects the Black community more than other communities, but it's a problem in other communities. Why are we concentrating on Black people when it's a big problem in the white community?
Because stage 4 cancer is worse than stage 1 cancer.
Yeah, that's a good answer, but it's still cancer.
But the thing is that it's having a disproportionate impact in Black communities. So shouldn't you give it more attention for that reason? If you know something is going to affect you disproportionately more, shouldn't you even try to avoid it in the first place?
okay. So Charles, let me ask you this: what were the list of factors that this gentleman presented? What did he say? He
So
said,
he gave system, that's welfare. He
okay.
gave culture, which is the hood. He
Mhm.
gave genes/genetics. Then he gave past plus present racism.
Okay. So here's my problem right there. Like, you know, genes / genetics. You make that He made that one of his options,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And he there was no self awareness to at least understand that that's kind of going to take the conversation where it actually shouldn't go. And so let's even say hypothetically, Charles, that on the poll, genes and genetics were picked as the most responsible factor.
Mm.
What then?
Well, wait, genes and genetics are responsible for Black people not being married, or was
We're
it
talking about
not doing
performance.
well on tests?
We're talking about the racial performance gap.
Gap, yeah.
Okay, well, my answer would be prove it. Charles Murray hasn't been able to prove it. It's not been proven. It's right now still a theory.
I sorry, but that's precise. Like, yeah, it's a
It's basically a dog whistle.
yeah. That's pretty. That's kind of where I'm going with this. Because if the moment that he had the idea to bring in genes and genetics into it, because like, this is sometimes the problem, Stanley, and I know you and I have discussed this multiple times when I often see, and I think you agree to that sometimes. Charles, this gentleman, I assume he's racialized as black.
Yeah, Wilfred Riley.
Okay, so see, sometimes it's sometimes you know back back where I come from, and I'm obviously sure this also pertains to with certain in certain in African American communities, in terms of sometimes there are inside conversations or internal conversations that a people should have that kind of shouldn't be made public. Kind of the whole idea of of trying to resolve things that are controversial, like in house. And what I find is, this this um this questionnaire is not only problematic in my view, but it does feel, it just have a certain racist undertone that I just I can't I can't ignore, right? I can't ignore.
Well, let
Um,
me. This is Wilfred Riley. Who? Where does Wilfred Riley figure into this?
He's the one who posed the question on Twitter.
See, that's surprising.
well, like it's one thing if maybe I don't know, I don't know what his goal was or his intent. Maybe it was just to more garner social engagement. If he kind of stayed within the clear waters. So I mean, if you want to look at, like, if you want to say culture, okay, you want to get your poll going, say
But
culture,
but
say racism, say
but
system.
but why is it taboo to mention genes and genetics?
Yeah, but
Well, let me ask you. You know, Wilfred Riley teaches at a historically black university, right? My
Mhm.
question to Wilfred would be: did you post this question on your campus, and what kind of response did you get?
but Charles, here's my counterpoint to that question is, okay, so we want to say, I mean, for me, the idea of genetics is taboo, right? Because the
Well,
reason,
the final answer, actually, most people, over 54% of people chose culture, and genetics
oh,
was the least.
okay.
Genetics was the least of the answers there. So that goes to show that, people still understand.
Well, the interesting thing, I'm not sure I disagree with culture, but I disagree with how the culture is approached because 400 years after, well, actually more than 400 years, black people didn't learn this culture. The ones who've been in America generationally, we didn't learn this culture on our own.
Yeah, but you have agency. You can learn and
Well,
unlearn things.
I don't know that you do. Do you really have agency if you're raised in a certain culture?
Yeah, you do. As a human being, you do.
I would tend to disagree. You live in water.
Hmm.
If you're a fish, and what's in the water tends to affect you. You can swim left, you can swim right, but you're still in the water.
So that means that the white people are superior then.
Uh, I'm sorry, that means that the white people are superior?
Yeah, because they were able to
I
take the black
How
people
about this?
from
The
their
white
motherland,
people, how
and
about the white people
for
or the
400
water?
years. So
The
that means
white
that
people, the white people in their culture are the water that black people swim in.
right, that means that they're superior because the fish can't live without the
No, it
water.
doesn't mean they're superior. It's not a value statement. It's the water. It's their
R-
culture.
Right. So and
And
the fish can't live without the
my
water.
point is the culture is bad. Certainly doesn't mean they're superior. It means their culture is what black people swim in.
So if it was bad, that would mean that all of the advancements in various technologies that come from it that have also fueled the world would be bad as well.
So you're basically saying that white people are the best people in the world?
No, I'm not saying that. That's what you just
Did
stated.
they do it all themselves or did they have help?
Well, you just stated the
Who
name
did they
water.
learn algebra from?
All right. So interesting conversation, but I think I have to draw this conversation to a close. Very late here, and I have a very busy day ahead of me tomorrow. Maybe we can pick off. We can pick off again. I'm having a conversation with Leah tomorrow, so after that conversation, maybe we can pick this off. So, but okay, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, no, I was just looking at the chat. Yeah, I think Anana was saying that, I think maybe Wilford Riley said can talk to you or something like that.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, I would love to talk to him.
Oh yeah,
So,
and Anan is
me
also
too.
asking if you can pull him up in the studio, but that's fine.
Oh, Anand, I'm so sorry, Anand. We have to go. So tomorrow we'll continue. I'm talking with Leah. After Leah, we'll just continue this conversation. I think we're making interesting points. SKC, please, I need you back, and Stanley and Oge.
Okay.
Hey,
Tomorrow.
SKT,
Sure.
hop on Charles's VC if you can.
I'm about to head out in about another hour, but yeah, I just overall, just as an overall thing, I think that it's a culture thing. Marriage is required in order to because two
No,
outcomes are better
it's
than
not
one,
required.
and yeah, I'll just leave it at that. You guys, Charles and Ogie, thank you for having me, and Stanley, of course, it was nice speaking with you guys.
Thanks, SKC. Thanks, Stanley. Thanks, Oge. So I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye for now.